you're sitting there right now with plastic in your blood. Not next to it, not near it, inside it, flowing through your veins at this very moment. And the worst part? It got there from your last meal. Scientists just discovered that the average person consumes about 5 grams of plastic every single week. That's the equivalent of eating a credit card every 7 days. Your body wasn't designed for this. No human body in history has ever had to process synthetic polymers at the cellular level, but yours does every single day. And what's happening inside you because of it is something most doctors won't even tell you about yet. Because the research is so new, so disturbing, that the full implications are still being uncovered in real time. But here's what we know for certain. These particles don't just pass through. They accumulate. They cross barriers that were supposed to be impenetrable, and they're changing the way your cells communicate with each other. The question isn't whether you're eating microplastics. You are. The question is what's happening to your body right now because of it. Let me paint you a picture of what's actually occurring inside your system. Think of your body as a highly sophisticated filtration plant. For millions of years, this plant evolved to process organic material. Proteins, fats, carbohydrates, minerals, even toxins from plants and animals. Your liver, your kidneys, your lymphatic system, they all develop intricate mechanisms to identify, process, and eliminate foreign substances. But here's the problem. Plastic is entirely synthetic. It's a material that's only existed for about 70 years in any significant quantity. Your body has absolutely no evolutionary blueprint for handling it, no enzyme specifically designed to break it down, no receptor that recognizes it as food or waste. So when these microscopic particles enter your digestive system, your body faces a crisis of recognition. It doesn't know what this substance is. And that confusion triggers a cascade of biological responses that were never meant to be activated by your food. Now, microplastics aren't just one thing. They come in different sizes, different polymer types, different chemical compositions. You've got particles ranging from 5 millimeters down to nanoplastics that are smaller than a human cell. Some are fragments of larger plastics that degraded over time. Others are microbeads that were intentionally manufactured tiny. Many carry additional chemicals, plasticizers like phthalates that make plastic flexible, flame retardants, UV stabilizers, colorants, and because plastic is hydrophobic, meaning it repels water, these particles act like magnets for other environmental toxins. Pesticides, heavy metals, persistent organic pollutants. They accumulate on the surface of the plastic, hitching a ride directly into your body. When you eat food contaminated with microplastics, and let's be clear, almost all food is contaminated to some degree now, the journey begins in your mouth. Some particles are large enough that you might actually be able to see them if you looked closely at your food. Others are completely invisible. They're in your drinking water, your sea salt, your honey, your beer. Your tea bags actually shed millions of microplastic particles when you steep them in hot water. They're in fruits and vegetables because plants uptake them from contaminated soil and water. They're in meat because animals consume them and they bioaccumulate up the food chain. You cannot avoid them. Not anymore. The contamination is too widespread. Let's talk about what happens in the first hour after you consume these particles. They enter your stomach, mixing with gastric acid and digestive enzymes. Now, your stomach acid is incredibly powerful. It can break down proteins, kill bacteria, dissolve some minerals, but it cannot break down plastic polymers. The chemical bonds in plastics, like polyethylene, polypropylene, and polystyrene, are far too stable, so these particles remain intact. But something interesting happens. The acidic environment can actually cause some of the additives in the plastic to leach out. Those phthalates, those bisphenols, they start separating from the polymer matrix and entering your digestive fluids in higher concentrations. This is when your body gets its first real chemical exposure, and your gut, which is lined with an incredibly complex ecosystem of bacteria, starts responding. Your gut microbiome, this is crucial, consists of trillions of microorganisms that play essential roles in digestion, immune function, and even mental health. Recent studies have shown that microplastics physically disrupt the gut barrier. Think of your intestinal lining as a selective security checkpoint. It's supposed to let nutrients through while keeping pathogens and toxins out. But microplastics can embed themselves in the mucus layer that protects this barrier. They can cause physical abrasions at the microscopic level, and they alter the composition of your gut bacteria. Certain beneficial bacteria populations decline. Potentially harmful bacteria proliferate. This shift, called dysbiosis, triggers low-grade inflammation throughout your digestive tract. You might not feel it acutely, but it's there. A constant, subtle state of immune activation that your body was never meant to maintain chronically. After 24 hours, here's where things get more serious. Some of those microplastic particles, particularly the smallest nanoplastics, begin crossing your intestinal barrier and entering your bloodstream. This shouldn't be possible. Your gut lining is designed to prevent large molecules and particles from passing through. But research has confirmed that nanoplastics can transcytose, meaning they're actively transported across the intestinal cells. Once in your bloodstream, they have access to virtually every organ system in your body, and they've been found everywhere scientists have looked. In human blood samples, about 80% of people tested have detectable levels of plastic particles in their blood. In lung tissue, in liver tissue, in placental tissue of pregnant women, even in human breast milk, these particles are crossing the blood-brain barrier, which is supposed to be one of the most selective barriers in your entire body, protecting your brain from toxins. But nanoplastics are getting through. Your immune system at this point is in a state of confusion. It recognizes these particles as foreign, but it doesn't have the tools to eliminate them effectively. So what does it do? It sends out inflammatory signals, cytokines, chemical messengers that recruit immune cells to the site of the foreign material. Macrophages, which are like the garbage collectors of your immune system, try to engulf and digest the plastic particles, but they can't break them down. So, these macrophages become chronically activated, stuck in a state of frustrated inflammation. They're trying to solve a problem they're fundamentally incapable of solving. And this chronic activation contributes to systemic inflammation throughout your entire body. This isn't the acute inflammation you get from an injury that helps you heal. This is chronic, low-grade inflammation that persists day after day, and chronic inflammation is the underlying mechanism in almost every major chronic disease. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, neurodegenerative conditions, cancer, autoimmune disorders. Between day 3 and day 7, assuming you're continuing to consume microplastics daily, which you are, the accumulation becomes more pronounced. Your liver is working overtime. The liver is your body's primary detoxification organ. It processes medications, alcohol, metabolic waste products. It's equipped with enzymes that can modify and neutralize many toxic substances. But plastic polymers are chemically inert in many ways. The liver can't enzymatically break them down. However, it does try to process the chemical additives that leach from the plastics. This puts additional stress on your hepatocytes, your liver cells. Studies in animal models have shown that chronic microplastic exposure leads to lipid accumulation in the liver, similar to what you see in fatty liver disease. It causes oxidative stress, meaning an imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants in your cells. This oxidative stress damages cellular components, DNA, proteins, lipid membranes. Your liver cells are literally aging faster because they're trying to cope with a contaminant they weren't designed to handle. Your kidneys are facing a similar challenge. They filter your blood constantly, removing waste products and excess substances. Some microplastic particles are small enough to reach the kidneys, and there's evidence they can accumulate in kidney tissue. This can interfere with normal filtration function. It can contribute to inflammation in the nephrons, the functional units of your kidneys. Over time, this chronic stress on your kidneys could contribute to declining kidney function. Most people don't realize their kidney function is declining until it's lost about 75% of capacity because kidneys have significant reserve. But the damage is cumulative, and it's largely silent until it reaches a critical threshold. Now let's talk about what's happening at the cellular level, because this is where it gets really disturbing. Inside your cells, you have mitochondria. These are often called the powerhouses of the cell because they generate ATP, the energy currency your body runs on. Every function in your body, from muscle contraction to nerve signaling to protein synthesis, requires ATP. Recent research has shown that microplastics and nanoplastics can penetrate into cells and directly damage mitochondria. They disrupt the mitochondrial membrane. They interfere with the electron transport chain, which is the process by which mitochondria generate energy. This means your cells are producing less energy. You might feel this as fatigue, but you probably attribute it to stress or poor sleep or aging. You don't realize that at the subcellular level, your energy production machinery is being sabotaged by plastic particles. There's also concerning evidence about endocrine disruption. Many of the chemicals that leach from microplastics are endocrine disruptors. They mimic or block hormones in your body. Bisphenol A, commonly known as BPA, mimics estrogen. It can bind to estrogen receptors and trigger inappropriate cellular responses. Phthalates interfere with testosterone production and function. These hormonal disruptions have far-reaching effects. In men, they can contribute to reduced sperm count and quality. Multiple studies have documented declining sperm counts in men over the past several decades, and microplastic exposure is considered a contributing factor. In women, endocrine disruptors can affect menstrual cycles, fertility, and increase the risk of hormone-related cancers. In children, exposure during critical developmental windows can alter the trajectory of sexual development and potentially affect cognitive development. By day 14 of continuous daily exposure, your body has reached a new steady state of sorts, but not a healthy one. You have a background level of microplastic contamination that's relatively constant, with new particles coming in daily and some being excreted, though not nearly as efficiently as they accumulate. Your inflammatory markers, if you were to get blood work done, might show elevations in C-reactive protein, a general marker of inflammation. You might notice subtle changes in how you feel. Maybe your energy is lower. Maybe you're experiencing more digestive discomfort, bloating, irregular bowel movements. Maybe your skin isn't as clear. These are all potential manifestations of the gut dysbiosis and systemic inflammation we talked about. But most people don't connect these vague symptoms to microplastic exposure because it's invisible and ubiquitous. Here's something most people don't know. Microplastics have been found in human atherosclerotic plaques. These are the fatty deposits that build up in arteries and cause heart attacks and strokes. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found microplastics in carotid artery plaques. And patients who had microplastics in their plaques had a significantly higher risk of heart attack, stroke, or death compared to those who didn't. Think about what this means. The plastic particles circulating in your blood aren't just passive passengers. They're being incorporated into the pathological processes that kill more people than any other cause. They may be contributing to plaque formation. They may be making plaques less stable and more likely to rupture. This is a direct mechanistic link between microplastic exposure and cardiovascular mortality. The neurological implications are perhaps the most concerning. Your brain is largely composed of fat, and many of the chemicals associated with microplastics are lipophilic, meaning they preferentially accumulate in fatty tissue. Once nanoplastics cross the blood-brain barrier, they can accumulate in brain tissue. Animal studies have shown that microplastic exposure affects behavior, learning, and memory. It increases markers of neuroinflammation. It can affect neurotransmitter levels. There's growing concern among neuroscientists that chronic microplastic exposure could be a contributing factor to the rising rates of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Now, we can't say that microplastics cause these diseases directly. These are complex, multifactorial conditions, but they appear to be another environmental stressor that contributes to neurological decline. At the 30-day mark, if you're consuming microplastics every single day for a month, your body has been in a state of chronic exposure for long enough that some of the more insidious changes are becoming entrenched. Epigenetic modifications may be occurring. Epigenetics refers to changes in gene expression that don't alter the underlying DNA sequence, but change how genes are turned on or off. Microplastics and their associated chemicals can cause epigenetic changes that affect metabolism, immune function, and even how your cells respond to stress. Some of these changes can persist long-term, and disturbingly, some epigenetic changes can potentially be passed on to offspring, meaning the microplastic exposure you're experiencing now could have effects that echo into the next generation. Your immune system at this point may be showing signs of dysregulation beyond just chronic inflammation. Some studies suggest that chronic microplastic exposure can lead to immune suppression in some aspects, while causing hyperactivity in others. This imbalanced immune response can make you more susceptible to infections while also increasing the risk of autoimmune reactions where your immune system mistakenly attacks your own tissues. You might find yourself getting sick more often or developing new allergies or sensitivities. Your body's ability to maintain immunological balance is being undermined. There's also the cancer question. And this is where we have to be very careful with the science because we don't have decades of human epidemiological data yet. But we do know several concerning things. Many of the chemicals in plastics are known carcinogens or suspected carcinogens. Chronic inflammation is a well-established driver of cancer development. Oxidative stress damages DNA, and accumulated DNA damage is a fundamental mechanism of cancer. Microplastics can carry carcinogenic substances directly into tissues, and some in vitro studies, meaning studies in cell cultures, have shown that microplastic exposure can promote cellular changes consistent with early cancer development. Does this mean microplastics directly cause cancer in humans? We don't have definitive proof yet, but the mechanistic plausibility is absolutely there. And given that microplastic exposure is essentially universal now and rapidly increasing, we may be looking at a cancer time bomb that we won't fully appreciate for another decade or two. Let's talk about the particles themselves for a moment. Because size matters enormously, the larger microplastics, those in the millimeter range, mostly pass through your digestive system. You'll excrete most of them. They can still cause local irritation and carry adsorbed chemicals, but they're less likely to penetrate tissues. The smaller particles, in the micrometer range, can penetrate your gut lining and enter circulation, but they're still too large to enter most cells. It's the nanoplastics, those in the nanometer range, that are the most insidious. These can cross virtually every biological barrier. They can enter cells. They can potentially even enter organelles within cells. And we have almost no ability to detect or measure nanoplastics in human tissue right now because they're so small that it requires incredibly sophisticated analytical techniques. So when you hear about microplastic contamination in human tissues, understand that we're probably dramatically underestimating the true extent of nanoplastic contamination because we simply can't measure it well yet. Different types of plastic behave differently in the body. Polyethylene terephthalate, that's PET, what most water bottles are made of, tends to be relatively inert as a polymer, but leaches antimony, which is a toxic metalloid used in its production. Polystyrene, used in phone containers and cups, can leach styrene, which is a probable human carcinogen. Polyvinyl chloride, PVC, can leach phthalates and in some cases vinyl chloride, a known carcinogen. Polycarbonate plastics leach BPA. Each type of plastic brings its own toxicological profile, and you're not being exposed to just one type. You're being exposed to a mixture of dozens of different polymers and hundreds of different additive chemicals simultaneously. Toxicology has historically focused on single exposures, one chemical at a time, but real-world exposure is always to mixtures. And we have very limited understanding of how these chemicals interact with each other in the body. Do they have additive effects? Synergistic effects where the combination is worse than the sum of the parts? We largely don't know. Here's what's particularly disturbing. The contamination is accelerating. Plastic production has doubled roughly every 15 years since large-scale production began. We've produced more plastic in the last decade than in the entire previous history of plastic production. And most of that plastic eventually breaks down into microplastics and nanoplastics. The ocean is now estimated to contain tens of millions of tons of plastic, and it's all gradually fragmenting into smaller and smaller pieces. This plastic is entering the food chain at every level. It's in plankton, it's in fish, it's in sea salt, it's in agricultural soil because sewage sludge containing microplastics is used as fertilizer. It's in the air you breathe, especially in urban environments because plastic particles become airborne. You're inhaling microplastics with every breath. And when you inhale them, they deposit in your lungs and can cause respiratory inflammation. Some of them are transported from your lungs into your bloodstream. There is no escape from this exposure under current conditions. Now, what can you actually do about this? Because I don't want to just leave you with existential dread. You cannot eliminate your exposure. That's not realistic. But you can reduce it. Stop using plastic water bottles. The act of drinking water from a plastic bottle releases thousands of microplastic particles into the water, especially if the bottle has been heated or is old. Use glass or stainless steel instead. Avoid heating food in plastic containers. Never microwave food in plastic. The heat dramatically increases the leaching of chemicals and the shedding of particles. Reduce consumption of processed and packaged foods because the packaging is a major source of contamination. Eat more whole foods that you prepare yourself. Filter your drinking water. Not all filters remove microplastics, but some do. Look for filters with small enough pore sizes to capture particles. Avoid synthetic fabrics when possible because they shed microfibers when you wash them, which is a major source of microplastic pollution. Dust your home regularly because household dust is heavily contaminated with microplastics. Use a vacuum with a HEPA filter. Support your body's natural detoxification systems. You can't detox microplastics specifically because your body doesn't have a mechanism for that. But you can support your liver and kidneys with adequate hydration, nutrient-dense foods, regular exercise. Reduce your overall toxic burden from other sources to take some pressure off your system. Consume foods high in antioxidants to combat oxidative stress. Cruciferous vegetables support liver detoxification pathways. Fiber helps bind toxins in your digestive tract and promotes their excretion. Probiotics may help maintain a healthier gut microbiome despite microplastic exposure. And perhaps most importantly, advocate for systemic change. Individual actions matter, but this is fundamentally a systemic problem that requires systemic solutions. We need to reduce plastic production. We need to transition to truly biodegradable materials for necessary applications. We need better waste management systems. We need regulations that limit the use of toxic additives and plastics. We need funding for research into the health effects of microplastics and into technologies that could potentially remediate environmental contamination. This is a global crisis that's affecting every human being on the planet, and it demands a response proportional to that threat. The reality is that you are part of the first generation of humans to live your entire life exposed to microplastics from birth to death. We are all participants in an uncontrolled global experiment, and the outcomes of that experiment are still unfolding. What we know so far is concerning enough. What we don't know yet is probably worse, because the science is always playing catch-up to the reality of exposure. By the time we fully understand the health consequences of chronic microplastic exposure, entire generations will have already been exposed. We can't go back. We can't undo the contamination that's already happened. But we can make choices today that reduce future harm, both to ourselves and to the generations that come after us. The question is whether we will.